not yet showing video.
There, okay. All right. I will open the August 27th meeting of the Middleton Plan Commission. First item on the agenda is our call to order and roll call.
Adams.
Here.
Bruce.
Here.
Harp.
Here.
Haniro. Here. Paulson.
Here.
Summers.
Here.
And Chair Sonntag is present.
Here. Okay, so all 7 accounted for?
Yes.
The approval of the minutes, changes, additions? Anybody? Nope, Lisa?
I just have one, and it's on page 6 of the new packet. It's under the building height. That last sentence on the page, I think it should read, commissioners support referring to total height in terms of feet instead of stories, not referring to feet in terms of total height instead of stories.
Oh, support referring to feet. That was poor. I wrote that poorly. So for total height is defined as feet instead of stories. is
Yeah,
the
that
intent.
would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
probably the cleanest
I
way
must
to
have
phrase it.
written it one way and changed it and then not fully changed it. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Hearing no
That's
other
okay.
changes, I will declare the minutes confirmed. And first item, now Terrence Wallace suggested we move items 1 and 2 and switch them. So we're going to do the preliminary plat for the Garden District Bruce Company redevelopment first. You want to address that first?
Sure. So this is a preliminary plat that addresses the guidance that had previously been provided by the Plan Commission and the Common Council. And there is a request that's included on this preliminary plat to retain an off-premise advertising sign. It did not show up on the previous version, but it was shown in early versions of the submittal. And I think that this version that's displaying on your screen shows it now shows it as an easement
Can you
rather than an outlot.
Can you zoom in?
in a little bit?
Sorry.
Yeah. And that is the staff's preference and recommendation, is that rather than taking a notch out of public parkland, we would rather have an easement with an agreement that has not yet been written for access to the sign and for that sign to be able to remain on the parkland. And we were thinking it could say something like, maybe for 99 years or until such time the Bruce Company is no longer operating a business on Parmenter Street. That I'm going to work with our city attorney, Matt Fleming, to draft that sign access easement document, but that has not yet been drafted. And that would need to get approved by the council. There were 3 contingencies that were included in the staff comments in the packet, and I would like to add at the recommendation of Mark, and I think that it's a good change to more specifically address this sign remaining on city property and also the access easement document. And so Mark, if you would please just pull up the recommendation with the contingencies, including the new version that you drafted.
Should be on the screen, but it's
It says you're screen sharing, but we're still seeing the plat.
oops, try it again.
Yeah.
Oh, he's
There we go.
pulling that up. May I ask a question about the easement? Do you envision that being for a fee? Like other easements sometimes can be?
I was not proposing that there be a fee associated with this, and the reason is that in their initial plat, they were not showing this as dedicated parkland. Whereas our staff thought that it was in the city's best interest to get that whole area and not have a notch out of the park. And so we asked them to revise it and dedicate that land as parkland. And so I thought it was kind of in the spirit of negotiating with the developer and was not proposing that we would charge a fee to that.
Okay, but this land is in the current negotiated parkland.
Yes, it
dedication.
is.
Can I ask a question with that?
Go
So
ahead.
if this easement would be located in land they're going to dedicate for a park, would it be like fenced off and restricted from access? I mean, it's just a,
It's a pole sign.
Pole sign.
That already exists on the Beltline. And they would like, it's a non-conforming sign. And I can actually show you what the sign looks like, and once you see it, you'll,
I have it too.
oh, you have it?
I have it
Okay,
ready to
that'd
go,
be
yeah.
great.
I mean, the
Thanks, Mark.
reason I asked that
Anticipate.
question is, are they,
Right here.
yeah. Is it taking away from land that would be in parks, right?
Mhm.
Or is it, since it's so close to the property line anyway, it probably would have been just landscaped and not actively recreated upon? What's the verb I'm looking for?
Jake, do you want to?
I like that one, recreated.
Recreated upon. I don't know what the
Um,
term is.
No, I mean, we don't really have a plan for the area. We just need an easement to access the sign in case there's any maintenance issues or anything like that. So no fence, or we weren't planning on doing any landscaping or anything other than whatever you guys choose to do within the park plan.
Thank you, Jake. Thanks.
And the motion that we are, the revision or the additional contingency that we're suggesting would shift that easement onto lot 8, basically just across the lot line.
Can you pull up the plat and show where the lot 8 is?
Let's stop sharing. Okay. Instead of here, it would be up here.
So instead of this, it would be on this side.
Yeah. So it's putting the easement on the other side of a shared lot line, but then it would have to come down and encompass the sign on the west edge of Outlot 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as like the question about encumbering the park, in my opinion, I don't think that it would, I mean, just because it's on the far edge of the park adjacent to the Beltline, I don't really foresee it being a huge encumbrance. It's 30 feet off the edge of the property line within the highway setback area, it looks like.
You probably wouldn't have any park improvements or facilities within the highway setback.
The only thing that, yeah, not within the highway setback, the only thing that's really being discussed for that far western edge is there was an idea previously, I think that Bruce Company and our parks staff had discussed, which was having a dog park kind of on the western side, but there hasn't really been a plan put together or approved by Parks Board at this point in time for how the park would be designed.
Lisa?
And is the access easement, does it have any, is there any pavement or gravel or anything else that is going to be required to gain access?
Not that I'm aware, no.
I would just like to put in a plug for a dog run or a dog park at this location. We don't have a single dog park that you can walk your dog to. Everybody taking their dog for exercise has to get in a car and drive. And I think that would be a huge amenity to a lot of people in this area.
Mhm.
So just my 2 cents in honor of National Dog Day yesterday.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add?
The only other thing that I wanted to mention is that our staff is recommending that we would not take the preliminary plat to the council until all of these, most of these contingencies are satisfied. And that is consistent with how we previously handled preliminary plats. This one in particular, there are a lot of markups, and we think that it would be much easier for the council to understand what is being approved if many of these items are satisfied. I know that there's one comment related to the name of the street, which that would be in the hands of the council to make a decision on, so that item would not yet be satisfied. But I just wanted to note that in particular, our staff is concerned about the petroleum tanks that were previously in this area that were removed in the early 90s. But the preliminary plat includes a notice of contamination and it references a document. And that document, which our engineering staff has reviewed, talks about how there would not be requirements for remediation unless there is soil removed 7 to 8 feet below the ground surface. And you can see that that area is within the city's public right-of-way, lands that the city would be accepting for a future public road. And the concern is that the developer's environmental consultant did a phase 1 environmental site assessment and recommended that there be a phase 2 analysis, but I don't believe that our staff has the phase 2 analysis or have reviewed it yet. And so we did feel that there was some risk to the city in accepting land without knowing more about the level of contamination and what would need to be remediated if there were a water main serving residences in the area that had to be buried within the soil. So, you know, we're not saying that there is contamination there that cannot be remediated, but the concern is that it could result in substantial additional costs to the city. And because it is in the area where the land would become the city's responsibility for putting in city services, we thought that it was pretty important that we had more information on that and that we get this cleaned up before, not get the site cleaned up, but that we get this preliminary plat cleaned up prior to taking it to the council.
Jake, you want to comment?
Yeah, I think, I can't recall if we did a phase 2, because that would have been when we started this project process, like 3 or 4 years ago. I'm sure we would have if the phase 1 mentioned it. I know we have True North consultants or environmental consultants on board ready to remediate some stuff on the Bruce Company property. So it wouldn't be that far of a stretch for them to remediate the soils underneath the public road. I don't know what the process of that looks like, or, you know, if that's something that needs to be done before it's dedicated or not, but it's something that's on our radar, so.
Is that something we can include in the if we approve this plat and put some kind of language in there regarding that they clean it up? That'll seem relatively simple to do. Kurt?
Does council have a policy not to accept land until there's been a phase 2? Because, I mean, they could certainly, as part of negotiations, insist if there's been a phase 2 study that the city should be able to review that before accepting property for dedication. Because even though you say you can clean it up, if it's city property and there's a spill, liability would rest with the city. I mean, whoever owns the property. So that's not necessarily an easy thing.
Yeah, as far as whether it's written into a policy or not, that I don't know, but I can say that in practice with the properties that I've been involved with acquiring for the city, like the Latitude Graphics site nearby, the sites that now are Conservancy Bend. We did a phase 1 ESA, and if there was any inkling of a recommendation to do a phase 2, we did borings, and that was fully understood by the council, what the ramifications for any contamination would be before they would acquire the property.
We have a phase 2. Just found it.
You found the phase 2?
Yeah, I can share it with you.
So, I mean, I guess the question is, if the plat that we approve, or that council approves, records a particular property as being dedicated to the city, that doesn't automatically confer ownership to the city until there's an agreement that would include the phase 2 conditions. I'm just wondering if we need to put it as a condition of the plat approval, or just urge council to make sure that the acceptance is conditional on attorney approval and engineer approval.
Yeah.
Or would it be best as the plat condition?
Well, it could be added as an additional condition of approval, but I guess it seems like there would be a lot of gray area in, are we just requiring that we receive the phase two? Or if there's substantial contamination, is there, any implication about who is responsible for cleaning it up?
Right.
And so it seems like there could be a lot of gray area left in that condition, depending on how it's written.
At what other stage then could we refer to a future stage or a future step in the process that we would not undertake unless and until? Because I think what's at issue here is how long do we, and if so, for how long do we hold up the plat approval?
Mhm.
And I think the answer is we don't want to hold it up, but we also don't want to make ourselves liable for property through this action. Can anyone answer the question of when it
Well,
would be appropriate?
I think to Kurt's point, should we add it to the plat approval process? I think we can. I think we can write the language as such to make it clear that the owner, not the owner, but the current property owner is going to pay for the cleanup if there's any additional to do. What's the to say right now that you got?
I mean, it's a lot of stuff that I don't understand.
He's not an engineer.
But no, I mean, the area where it is obviously in the future public road, and I think a portion of it might be in the future private road. So, when we move forward with the Olmsted, which is phase one, and we'll be building the public and the private road at the same time, we're going to be ripping it all up and remediating it anyway.
Yeah, well, the question is, if we're putting in sewer lines and stuff, we're gonna be digging more further down than 7 feet. So that's why the concern, even though it'll be covered up with a road.
Yeah.
And the developer is fine with adding a condition to the plat approval. Some language to the effect that I don't even know what the language would be, that if the phase two indicates need for remediation, the city will require remediation at developer's expense
Yeah.
to the satisfaction of the city engineer and city attorney.
That's fine as long as it's done in concert with when we're actually digging soil, and we don't have to go in there, remediate it, take it out, and then a couple months later start digging again.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Anything else, Abby, that?
Because we usually condition plat approval on a lot of those
Sure.
technical engineering
Mhm.
items anyway.
There's always conditions.
And Abby, you were suggesting that we just wait on the plat approval until some of these conditions were met or cleaned up.
To me, this does not look like it's ready to be included in the council packet.
How soon could it be ready?
So I had sent Abby an email earlier today when I was looking through the agenda, and like our understanding is that there's a reason there's a 2-phase plat approval process. That the preliminary plat, we gather comments from you guys, and then if you see this going in a good direction, you guys approve it, and then we'll take those comments, revise the final plat, and then resubmit it. Our concern with this is that if this is denied because of statutory timelines or whatever, we're gonna have to go get it revised, then resubmit, then wait, a couple weeks while engineering staff reviews the preliminary plat again, get the preliminary plat ironed out, then touch up the final plat, then submit that, then, it just adds a couple months to our timeline, which we aren't in favor of. We think we can take these comments, address them at a final plat level, resubmit that, and be done with it.
I think that's a reasonable request. I mean, that's how we've done it in the past.
And if it's a preliminary plat with a number of conditions and council approves those conditions, that doesn't have to go back to council or plan commission for approval. It can just be
Mhm.
staff
Right.
checking the box.
At the Preliminary plat level.
Yeah.
Staff could approve it.
I mean, the
Because
concern,
final plat, I mean, by the time we see a final plat, it's usually, it's
Yeah.
all buttoned up. It's just approve and move forward.
and the question here is if we don't do that, it's gonna move it into the winter season and not gonna be able to start this project until
Yeah.
next spring. So that's the real kicker here, is how long it's gonna delay it.
The lots are not created until the final plat is recorded with the county.
Correct.
So Jake, are you trying to start this project this year, get it under construction? Because there's also a TIF request associated with this, and there's quite a bit of information I think that we're waiting on for that,
Yeah.
and it's not been negotiated and there's no agreement.
I think this year might be a stretch. But with that said, like, I think we want assurances that the plat is approved and finished before we start, moving forward with everything else, approval wise. So that's kind of the rush. Developers are always in a rush.
Yeah.
You guys haven't noticed.
Phase 2 environmental site assessment. I know it's hard to type when people are. And I think Jake wanted a condition after city engineer, in coordination with the development phasing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that
Correct. Yeah,
we only want to dig things up once.
correct. Yeah.
Do we want to say that the need for soil remediation beneath the right of way, or or just keeping it general?
I think just soil remediation.
That's fine.
And, uh, since we don't know what phase 2 says and what the recommendations may be, do we need that, to say indicates the need for soil remediation in the opinion of the city attorney and city engineer? Something to, I mean, because we
Sure.
could still have a disagreement over what's really required.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a better way to say it, yeah.
Indicates the need for soil remediation. How about if the city engineer and city attorney
Yeah.
conclude that?
And if you have the phase 2 assessment, you can speed things along by sending it to Abby and Sean.
Yeah, tomorrow. Or tonight.
So is that better?
Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks, Mark. So does anybody want to make a
And
motion?
then the yellow, just to clarify, the yellow is additional, so the two white, the ones in white that are not highlighted, 1 and 2, that was from the original staff recommendation. 3 is the one you just added, and 4 is the one that pertains to the sign access easement. That's language that I was suggesting, whether you wish to have that easement on lot 8 or keep it on outlot 1.
And is there a number 5, Mark?
It's rolled off the screen here.
For number 4, could we do it like 5 feet on each side? I'm just throwing that out there just so we have, as much buildable room as possible. And if it's gonna be grass, not like fenced or, landscaped anyway.
What kind of setback were you planning on lot 8?
I don't know.
You don't know,
I
okay.
don't know. I'm just trying to give myself some wiggle room.
And outlot 1 is gonna be the park.
Right.
And remind me why we don't want the access easement on City Park?
That's what they're proposing now. We just felt, I think that this is something pertaining to a structure that is not something the city will be owning. I don't know, Abby, if you have a strong opinion.
I
one
don't
way or
have
the
a
other.
strong opinion on that.
Yeah, I don't really either, I guess. But the part of this, so whether it's on outlot 1 or lot 8, I guess isn't as important as just the idea that there's a path towards removing the non-conforming sign.
And all we mean by access easement is it's not gonna be buildable. And it's not gonna be paved or in any way, so it's gonna be grass, and it just means they have the right to drive a truck over it to fix the electrical. Does PRFC have an opinion? Not that you are all of the committee, but
We did not take this issue to PRFC to review.
No, my initial thought was chances of something being developed right on the line is just probably not gonna happen. I just don't see that as something that would likely happen. And if it's not gonna be, if there's gonna be not gonna be any improvements, it's still usable. I think that's the other key part there. I don't think there would be too much of an issue.
There couldn't be any landscaping though in
Right.
that area. I think I think Jake made a reasonable suggestion, which was to split the easement
Yeah.
across the 2 lots.
well, I mean, there could be landscaping. It just meant if you drive a truck over it, you gotta replant it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And this is just for maintenance and repairs of the sign.
Yeah.
Mark, can we ask what about the sign is non-conforming?
It's a pylon sign. That is, so in other words, we don't allow pylon signs in our new ordinance. Here's what it looks like.
Right.
And the operation of the digital display is also non-conforming, and it's an off-premise sign.
And they don't want a
And
brand
probably
new,
height too.
a
I'm
brand
sorry.
new conforming sign to go with the brand new garden district.
I don't think we can build a sign like that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we would love that.
Any other conditions that you want to put on the preliminary plat? I think we pretty much got it summed up.
I don't have a condition, but I have a question. I noticed there's a for sale sign on some of this property, a T-Ball Enterprises for sale sign.
Mhm.
Can you explain that?
I wish I could. That was just as much of a surprise to me as it was to anybody, so.
I just want to make sure that all our discussion right now, the time we're all taking and the staff and the council is not for naught.
I trust me, time I put into this, I hope it's not either, so.
But it's your understanding it is not currently listed on any MLS.
No. Not as far as I know.
So the sign could be performative.
Potentially.
Could be a negotiation.
I had one question. It's about the developer's letter. I think it's page 50 of the packet
Oh, yeah.
regarding the desire to defer the fee payment, the park improvement fee payment. What do we usually do?
We charge park improvement fees at the time the building permit is pulled, the building permit and the zoning permit. And I don't think we would have any way to recoup those after the fact. So I've already shared with Jake a few weeks ago that I would not support delaying payment of the fees. The fees are not necessarily for
For
this
this
exact
part. Mhm.
property because the whole city is one park system. And so as improvement fees are collected, they can be used anywhere in the system.
Could we say a building permit in a future phase or something like that? That would be built around like the 2028 timeline for this park or?
The
Or is it just
improvement,
the
the
first?
park improvement fees are paid when you pull each permit. So like if you pull a permit for the Bruce Company, that's when you would pay the park improvement fees associated with that, which actually there wouldn't be. So scratch what I said, because there's no residential units.
Yeah,
But the park improvement fees, like for each of the multifamily buildings, you would pay those.
but the
At
fee
the
in lieu,
time.
like that 300 grand or so.
The fee in lieu is usually paid when we sign a city developer agreement. So it would likely be for the whole thing unless you wanted to.
That's what, I mean, that's the one I was talking about, you know, maybe paying that down the line when the park is actually going to be improved.
The
Or with the
fees
future
in
builder.
lieu of
Yeah,
land dedication.
Yeah,
Um,
I just wanted your guys' thoughts. We thought we'd throw it in there and
yeah, we have, for some of the larger subdivisions like Red Tail Ridge or, Bell Farm recently, the fees in lieu of land dedication, there has been an amount allocated per phase. So it's possible for fees in lieu of land dedication that that's something we could look at for the city developer agreement, but the park improvement fees are paid at the time that you pull the permit, and they are also the fee that is in place at the time you pull the permit.
Yeah,
So
that
like
one
right
makes
now,
sense to me.
yeah, if the fees are increased, then
I'll just mark it down to bring that up when we're going through the development agreement stuff.
yes, good idea.
For us, it's as much as we can break up the costs over the course of the phases, not front load the development. It helps, so.
There any more discussion on the 5 items that we're looking at here?
Let's go back to,
Then I'll make a motion.
I'll bring it up again.
Go ahead.
And is Mark gonna make me read it all into the record, or? So I would move to recommend approval. Recommend to the council approve the preliminary plat contingent on the following revisions numbered 1 through 5. As indicated in on the screen.
So no changes, Mark.
Well, I slightly edited yellow since you saw it last, but I think it
Okay,
reflects
so
what you said.
yellow reads, shifting the location of the 10-foot wide sign access easement leading to the off-premise advertising pylon sign so that it straddles the lot 8 outlot 1 property line and establishing an agreement allowing the sign's continued display as legal line. Think so.
Okay.
Is that?
Looks
For you?
good to me, yeah.
Is there a second?
Adams will second.
Yes, Abby, it's discussion.
I was just thinking this through more, and Jake, when I mentioned that the park fees in lieu of land dedication could be paid by phase, that's when the final plat is not covering the entirety of the preliminary plat area. So I didn't know how you anticipated bringing in the final plat, if it's all coming in as one, but if it's all coming in as one, then you probably would need to pay all of the fees. But if you're splitting it into 2 separate final plats, then it's possible that that could be negotiated.
Okay. I didn't think about that, but I'll
That-
talk to our team about it. I mean,
That's usually when you do a large subdivision.
yeah, I
You
know.
record the final plat for each phase.
Yep.
Would it, I don't want to jump into the weeds on this, but I mean, say the park's not being built until 2028 anyways, when Latitude Graphics leases are up. It would actually benefit the Bruce Company to delay platting that portion of it so that they can continue to use it for their operations in the meantime. So, but you know, would we be able to split like that and maybe a couple other lots off of, on the western half of it, off of the, you know, phase 1 final plat? Or does it have to be dedicated up? I guess I'm just
Yeah,
throwing
I
this
think
out
it
there.
probably is gonna depend a lot on access, because you're probably gonna want that road
Yeah,
being constructed early on, and that would need to be part of the first
that,
final plat.
yeah, and that'll have to go, the road will have to go in right away because phase 1 will need the access there, so.
You can't create a new property line until you record a final plat.
Okay.
You probably can't sell some of the parcels or transfer ownership until you record a final plat.
Let me, we'll talk to them, and then our engineers, and we'll circle up just to make it through a
Okay.
little bit.
Can I just ask a quick question about the street name? The Garden District is a developer request, I would imagine, Jake?
Yeah.
Is there any reason that we can't go up to Donna Drive with that because of existing properties? Is that the problem? Like Jefferson, I think Fire is there.
Public Works was recommending that we take that to the council to make the
Okay.
determination for where the break should be.
Well, what I wondered is why can't it just be Laura Lane? And that's because it just would make sense to just keep the same street name, but
Can we
don't-
delay that
okay,
discussion
that's
until
fine.
after
All
we
right. Fine. Sorry.
vote on this motion? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, any other comments you want to make, Mark, on the
No.
road? Okay. Anything else, Jake? Good?
No. I'm good.
Okay, well, you might as well stay there because we're on
Yeah.
here. On to the Garden District discussion.
No, Conservancy Bend.
I'm sorry, Conservancy Bend, yeah.
Hard to keep.
I'm looking at two, aren't I? Thank you, Kurt. This is the General Development Plan GDP amendment for the Conservancy Bend residences. And Abby, do you want to comment on this, or Mark?
Yeah, so this basically what's before you here, this was in the packet for 2 weeks ago. So they had come back with the design that had been responsive to the guidance provided by the Plan Commission previously. So they now are showing the 44 unit building to have 6 2-bedroom units with a 15-foot setback above ground level from the east lot line and a direct pedestrian connection to Clark Street. So those were, I think, the key features that were requested at the July 9th meeting.
The pedestrian crossing, that's gonna be privately owned. That's not a public access easement, right? That's just to allow your residents to cross over the sunken parking entrance to get to Clark Street, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's how we see it. It was actually, I believe, Mark's suggestion or maybe Sean's suggestion to add that in, so.
That way they can access the Conservancy and the high school and.
Well, the main concern we had was that otherwise the main entrance didn't have a sidewalk connection from the public street. You were going to be walking through a parking lot.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that
it's
was-
nice. I think you want to be able to cut through the site as well.
Yeah.
Walk from.
Right. No, it just,
It was, I think it was a good suggestion.
Yeah.
It was a good add.
You just don't want high school kids walking through there.
Yeah, we right now we get a ton of car traffic through
Yeah.
there before and after school, so. And I'm sure foot traffic on their way to Culver's or something.
So, but it would be clear, this is private property. It's not a.
Yeah.
Anything else, Mark?
no, then we have a recommendation with 7 contingencies.
Is that from your staff? No?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have no changes from what was in the packet.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, although I want to combine these. Okay, so my motion is to recommend that the Common Council approve the GDP amendment for Conservancy Bend residences with the 7 numbered contingencies listed below. And this recommendation is based upon the Plan Commission's review of findings of fact pertaining to zoning map amendments, as well as the criteria for GDP approval and the determination that the public benefits outweigh any and all potential adverse impacts of approving the GDP amendment. And then the list of contingencies for approval are starting to show on the screen.
Oops, sorry.
That's okay. I think the one changed contingency, or the one that changed compared to the packet, is number 6, just rephrased to make it consistent with all the others. That's my motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Kurt,
Nairo motioned, second by Paulson.
Thank you. And I appreciate Alder Haniro letting me know she was going to offer this change, and I like the format of this better, so this will become our new template.
okay, very good. It's been moved and seconded.
I
Lisa?
have some questions.
Mhm.
On page 15 of the packet.
Just relating to motion?
Well, yes, because there might be more contingencies
Okay,
added.
all right.
Um. So there's an item 1F about, this is page 15, yeah. Additional details about property owner association covenants, easements, and deed restrictions will need to be provided during the SIP phase. Does that apply even though this is not a building with owner occupied units?
So these comments are from several months ago from our engineering staff that were on their initial review. And I just carried them forward because we had a changed site plan, but without all the submittal of the original details. So I didn't weed out anything from their comments. Because an SIP will need to still be submitted, it would behoove the applicant to address all these concerns. So I don't think it needs to be part of your motion tonight.
Okay, and then going on to page 16, there are a number of comments related to utilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, do the references to the replat, is that a reference to a future plat or to the, okay,
I can answer that.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Yeah, cool.
So currently the site is divided into numerous individual lots for each of the townhome units. And so our engineering staff identified the need for a replat to reconfigure the site so that the utilities that lie beneath the site are properly situated beneath the proper lots. I don't know how to go into greater detail than that.
and
But
that's coming our way.
so that will have to be worked on as part of the SIP, through the SIP process. Then they'll have to work on that with engineering staffs to make sure that it satisfies and protects the existing utility access points to the townhome units that are there.
Okay, and then what about, I know in other, with other developments, we've asked that the zoning be changed to match what the new districts are. Is that possible with this property?
It may be possible, but probably not, because I think the setback from Clark Street is, I think we would require a 20-foot setback, and I think they're only doing 15. So I didn't give it serious thought because I knew that there was various issues that likely didn't comply with our new zoning. So I could look at it further, but I'll look at that again, but I think the setbacks are the issue there. In fact, I'm sure they are.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Okay, that takes us to item 3 on the agenda. The site plan review for the convenience store addition at Middleton Farmers Co-op. You want to do background on that, or?
Daphne,
Daphne?
with this one.
Sure. So they're just expanding the existing building to expand their convenience store. This site does have a lot of, I believe, the eastern portion in floodplain. However, this addition does not touch any of the floodplain, so there's no additional review needed for that. And then we just have, we recommend approval contingent upon providing enough ADA accessible parking.
Thank you, Daphne.
Looks good.
Somebody want to move?
Sure, I'll move approval. Of the. Of
This
the
is the site plan review,
Site
yes.
plan review, approval of site plan review subject to adequate provision of ADA parking.
So is there a second?
I'll second. This is an room.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Motion carries. Thank you. On to item 4. Site plan review for the stair addition at Fitzgerald's Bar and Grill.
On this agenda item, Commissioner Summers is abstaining and has walked away from her camera.
Okay.
And Daphne has the staff report.
Yes, so this is, they're proposing to add, or there is an existing unit on the second floor. And so in order to provide adequate egress for residential, they have to have, that secondary stairway. So they're adding that on the exterior. It is not increasing any impervious surface. It's just really just like the visual impact from the street. And so that's why it needs site plan review. And so you can see it's right here kind of rendered. And then I can also pull up the site plan.
30 years ago, it used to be a office up there. Is it now or had it been a residence?
Well, there was some concern that it was, the land use was not suitable for the building. So it was a building code violation and possibly a zoning violation.
Yeah, okay.
But now the site is zoned mixed use, so now it's mainly a building code issue.
So if you go back to the rendering,
Sure.
sorry. That was the architect rendered in what the stairs would look like.
Yes. Yep. And then we have Brad, I believe, from Sketchworks is on.
Is there,
the call.
is there any way to screen any of that from the street? I realize it's on the side of the building, but it would. I mean, the adjoining property is the car lot
Right.
and it's set back from the street, so I'm not too concerned, but.
Screening.
I mean, the first thing I thought is that's pretty out there.
I think it's more visible in this rendering than it will be in practice.
Okay,
Actually, because of how it's just a black and white drawing on this colored rendering. And the fact that that building has a lot going on anyways, and it's set so far back, I don't think
Okay,
anybody's gonna
yeah.
care.
I withdraw my question. Do we know what restaurant is gonna go inside? Because they're also proposing to alter the first floor.
Yeah, I can speak to that. They've proposed, there's actually 2 restaurants. One is the Fitzgerald's Bar and Grill, which would be at the front portion of that. And then there's a Korean barbecue that would be in the center portion.
The only reason I ask is, remember we approved this years and years and years ago, and I've been waiting for my Korean barbecue. Right by every day, hungry.
It's been a struggle. I'll put it that way. It's
All the
yeah,
carry room kind of give it away.
yeah.
You don't want.
Yeah, they're currently working through existing mechanical equipment and trying to upgrade and make sure that that's all code compliant. We just went through the architectural changes with Jim Scholander and got that all approved. So now they're on to the mechanical upgrade. So yeah, it's been a number of setbacks and with contractors and whatnot, and I think they're finally on the way to moving forward to getting this reopened.
Brad, while you're there on the speaker, to the left of the stairs, it looks like there's some storage units.
That's an existing cooler that's there. And then directly in front of that, so kind of between what will be the stairs and the cooler, there are some ground mounted AC units that are there.
And all that will remain?
That will remain, right. And what we're trying to do with the stairs, we're trying to make that as open as possible because there is the existing window into the bar on the first floor. And so we're trying not to cover up that window to the south, correct? So trying to leave it as open as possible.
Go ahead.
Anything they can do to get life back on that parcel would be
Yeah.
really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they've been cleaning it up the last couple of weeks and really trying to update that. And I know they've got signage that will be going on, obviously that needs to get approved. But I believe their signage company should be submitting something here relatively soon for updated signage.
And if you could advise the signage company that the existing structure cannot be used anymore.
Okay.
All right. Have you?
Yeah, I've already
Okay,
talked
all
to him
right,
about
good,
that.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Lisa?
Well, I'll make a motion if we're ready. I move approval of the addition of exterior stairs at Fitzgerald's Bar and Grill for egress from the second floor apartment.
There a second?
Adams will second.
Discussion? Or further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
That required an up and down vote.
No.
Up and down. Okay, on to item 5. This is policy development for on-street accessible parking. Are we, you going to lead this?
Mark is.
Oh, Mark is, okay.
So the Public Works Committee had discussed this at their meeting earlier this month and asked the Plan Commission and other committees to weigh in on a draft policy that is responding to requests for on-street accessible parking in downtown Middleton in various locations. In a nutshell, the city is obligated to designate accessible parking spaces where on-street parking spaces are marked. Now, we don't have marked parking spaces that are parallel, but we do where they're angled parking spaces. Those are marked. Some cities have, marked their spaces where there's parallel, but we don't do that. So where there are angled parking spaces, we are, based on new standards that were recently adopted, federal standards, we need to provide accessible parking spaces. I won't go into all the details that were in my staff report, but basically the policy that was drafted, which is on the screen, is went through our engineering staff to the Public Works Committee, and they're asking for feedback from you at this time.
Can you walk us through what is in our packet? And I'm asking because, so the policy itself is the action? Or
Yes,
are they
that's-
developing a policy and they just want our input now?
So the heading of this, I think is, what was at the very top? Policy, yeah, okay. So the answer, Alder Nairo, is yes. The action is intended to be that becomes a internal policy document for how we handle this in the future, how we handle requests for on-street parking, accessible parking.
As
Does-
answered by
designate them.
engineering?
Correct.
Okay.
And then the tables, starting with page 77, this shows where we have accessible, but where we have parking marked
Right.
on the street.
Mm.
So that's why, for instance, Middleton Hills isn't on there because there are no markings.
Correct.
Okay. So these would need to be changed to be consistent with the policy if it's adopted.
So in the Greenway Station example, there are currently 39 marked stalls and there are 2 accessible stalls and 2 are required, so we don't need to add any
Yep.
there.
But all the others that
But all
have a
the others, right.
deficit would need to be changed. Okay,
Right.
and then the next page, accessible parking and facilities served by parking lots. Why is this here if the policy is on-street parking?
I think these are all publicly owned parking lots.
But this,
And this was a tally that, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, but this table has no relevance to the on-street
I-
parking policy.
Well, I think it's there because to say, if there's no on-street
This is what
accessible
you have,
parking in front
right?
of the senior center, well, are some in the lots next
Right.
door.
Okay.
This was, you know, it looks like it's not quite in final form, but this was, I don't know who did the survey analysis, who did the site visits or the air photo interpretation, whatever they ended up doing. But this was obviously a work in progress, trying to show for these off-street facilities, parking lots, what are our current accommodations? And so this is a work in progress. I agree, it's not directly related to the policy at
So
hand.
what kind of feedback? I mean, if it's a policy, a federal thing.
Well, I think what they specifically, what Sean, our engineer, specifically asked for is that he wants to know how you feel about the prioritization of implementation of the parking spaces. Because, you know, we still have to, there's some budgeting that there's some retrofits that go into this. So I think if you look at this second and third paragraphs in particular, let's see here. No, I'm sorry, it's in the first paragraph. Staff will plan to prioritize creation of on-street accessible parking stalls in existing marked angled areas, followed by, so that's the prioritization of what we are proposing. It's written as if it's a policy already, but this is a draft. So they're wondering if you agree with this prioritization, this sequence of that's outlined here on this screen.
So I'm a little confused because like tonight when I came to City Hall, there's one off street, right, by City Hall. And I think it's fair to say, given the age of our population, we probably need one or two on the street right in front of City Hall and one or two in front of the library. But as I understand it, if you make it a handicapped accessible parking stall, you have to pay, you have to mark it. And you'd have to cut the curb out so that there'd be access on that side. But you wouldn't therefore then have to stripe that whole street.
Right.
You could stripe just handicap spots in front of the senior center, in front of City Hall. And the budgetary impact is if you stripe it as handicap, you have to cut the curb 5 feet in, right?
Only if there's 14 feet of width. And this is where it gets complicated, but in the middle of the staff comments,
Yeah.
I said where the width of the face of the curb to the edge of the right of way. So if you take the curb that your wheels are against,
Yes.
if there's 14 feet from there to the outer edge of the sidewalk right away, if there's 14 feet, which generally there is not,
Right.
but if there were to be 14 feet, then you would have to do those modifications where you cut into the terrace and do all that. We wouldn't be required to do that. And I can't think of anywhere downtown where we'd be required to do that, but then you're obligated to put that parking space as close to a curb ramp, existing curb ramp as possible, which is typically an intersection, or in the case of here, it happens to be right in front of the building. So that first spot, as you come, you know, from Park Street, the first spot past the crosswalk is where you would put that.
So theoretically, as I understand this policy, the engineering department could go out tomorrow and paint 4 handicap stalls, 2 in front of the library, right by the curb cut, and 2 by City Hall. And we wouldn't have to pay for anything other than paint?
And the sign, yeah, that's
Sign.
my understanding as well. And so some of these are not, let's see, how did I write this?
So if that's true, why didn't we do that yesterday? I'm trying to understand what the policy is.
I think apparently this policy, I don't remember the exact acronym, but this has been something that was under development. It might be in the.
Yeah, it just came out from the feds.
Yeah, exactly.
Just came from the feds.
Yeah, exactly. And I
After
think-
30 years.
Right. So I think Sean was waiting for that to happen. We have had these requests for some time now, but he, I believe, was aware that this was coming. So
So
I
there's
I
probably,
can't answer your question why we didn't do it
well,
sooner.
I mean, that makes sense. If we're waiting for the federal policy. So we probably have nowhere in downtown where we have a 14-foot right of way.
Nothing comes to mind, right? Now, we do have the angled parking stalls where we have that extra width.
You have to have that.
So in that sense, we have 14 feet there, but there's angled stalls, and there we can make some modifications to make them officially handicapped accessible. I also have suggested, and I really like this idea. We see in some places, I saw it today when I was at a medical clinic, and you see it in front of, I think I've seen it in front of Kohl's, where they'll have signs that are, parking for expectant mothers or for seniors or for, those aren't legally enforceable spaces, but they are options that we could also do to supplement what we're obligated to do. I think that would be, something else that we could consider, but that's not legally enforceable as a accessible parking space.
So-
I wouldn't be inclined to support the courtesy ones. I think that's opening up
I'd say,
opportunities for people to,
Abuse.
Special parking for former mayors,
well,
right in front.
to report
Balls.
concerns about people not abiding. I just see it as
That's
blowing
fair.
up next door.
I'd say do the minimum. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and what
I
is
think
the minimum?
Handicap parking, accessible parking is fine, but
Mark, my only question really then goes back to the table with on the off-street parking facilities and the parking stalls and how that's part of this policy or not part of this policy. I just don't quite get that. I assume that if we've got off-street parking that we ought to be bringing all those off-street parking areas up to the appropriate ADA standards.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And are you saying that you don't see that as being part of the policy at this point?
Well, I just don't know where it was noted in that policy.
Well, this policy specific to on-street accessible parking is how the agenda item is
Yeah.
is
so
read.
having these facilities in the first table would be helpful if we're trying to figure out, well, wait, are there options in a parking lot?
Yeah.
Because if there are options in a parking lot, then are we required to provide accessible parking?
And we have to consider the fact that, I haven't done a site plan for this. Maybe it is better to increase the number of handicap accessible stalls in the library parking lot rather than putting them on the street where there's possible other vehicle or pedestrian conflicts.
We're not obligated to put one on the street here because it's not marked parking.
Yeah, and I'm
But-
not talking about whether we're obligated, but what's the safest for
Understood.
people with wheelchairs? Is it
Mhm.
to have a designated slot on street? Or is it in an off-street environment where there's less conflict with other vehicles?
But-
Because presumably if you get out the driver's side is on the road. But if you need to help a passenger get out or get a wheelchair, that's usually on the passenger side. Then you're right on the sidewalk by City Hall in front of the library.
But a
Is
driver,
it safer?
a driver may choose to leave through the passenger side too. We don't know somebody who has a blue sticker,
right.
we don't know what their disability is. I mean, they may, you
There's
could have,
also the company that goes out the rear too.
right.
See those cars run.
Right.
So I mean, it could be anywhere.
At some point, it's up to the people to decide whether they can park there or not. We just need to make sure that they have sufficient access to parking proximate to their destination.
Can you go back to your priorities just for a moment so that I just make sure I understand? So first, we're doing on-street accessible parking stalls and existing marked and signed angled spaces.
Oh, that's the Stone Horse Green, that
Yeah.
loop, what do you call it, Abby? Horseshoe.
The
The
horseshoe.
horseshoe.
And then, and down, was that Elmwood or,
In front of Valencia Lofts.
yeah, Valencia Lofts there.
It's kind
Staybridge.
of around the Stone Horse.
Barriques would be another example.
Yeah,
It's, yeah.
followed by
Just wanted to
the
make sure I
marks
understand.
signed on-street parallel parking areas in downtown. Are there any of those
Yeah.
Minimally.
parallel parking?
I don't believe so. And neither signed nor marked. I don't believe there are any like
Okay.
that. But there's certainly areas where there's a lack of off-street parking. So for example, between Free House and Village Green, Elmwood, for example, there's no off-street parking there. So it would make sense, I think, to provide at least one accessible parking space on the street,
I
even
see.
though it's,
Even though it's, yeah,
yeah.
yep, okay.
Is Public Works asking? Because I could be wrong, and I haven't seen the data, but isn't it generally safer that handicap accessible stalls are off-street, not on-street? And this is only if you provide marked stalls on street, you have to be
Right.
accessible, which seems fair.
It'll be more expensive.
So that's an example, right in front of Free House. There's no off-street,
Right.
so second best is on-street, but in front of the library and the senior center, there's off-street.
Right.
We want what's safest, and
Mhm.
we probably want more.
Yes,
I'm with you. I hear all the time that those stalls are usually filled, right?
Mhm.
With an aging population.
So I mean, I think the priority would be to put them in the off-street parking where possible,
Where possible, yeah.
where possible. I think it is safer. It's easier.
Absolutely.
Especially in the winter.
Yeah.
Especially in the winter.
Well,
So-
on that subject, I'm glad you brought that up because I know from I play pinochle at the senior center and I've had people come up to me and say, can you do something about the plowing? Because they plow, but then the spaces between the, what do they call the curb stop things? Those will be full of snow and slush. And so somebody with a walker or a wheelchair, they just can't get through, or even somebody with a cane, it's very difficult to get through. So that needs to be addressed.
That's another,
Otherwise, this,
it's another discussion.
right, right. But you brought up snow, so.
So our action tonight would be to just review and provide comment?
Yes, I think that would be sufficient. I mean, ultimately, this is mostly the Public Works purview, but because we have parking requirements with land uses, I think that's why they felt it was appropriate to get your input.
I think what you've given them already is plenty.
Yeah. I guess the question is, why do we have on-street signed and marked stalls that are not adequate? Is that mainly because the guidelines have only come out recently?
Yeah,
They were
so,
built
so,
before the guidelines. I mean, if our citizens ask, why haven't we done this in the past? We would say, right, this guideline only came out
I
in
don't know
late
what-
2023 from the feds.
I don't see any reason why we couldn't have put accessible parking in on the horseshoe, for example, sooner, but we're doing it now.
So the preference is to put the spaces off-site when possible, and for any marked on-street parking, we have to provide the required amount, right?
Do you have an opinion as to distance when you say off-site off-street where possible? So is the library off-street parking and the city hall off-street parking relative to the entrance to city hall? You know, what distance? You know, that's where it gets into some
I would let the
subjectivity.
Public Works Committee. determine.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there must be guidelines.
But I wondered
or
when you said where
requirements.
possible, I wondered if you had a number in your distance in your head. So, okay.
ADA requirements tell you how far a stall has to be from an entrance, right?
I think it says
Closest practice
exactly.
in the code.
Right, but having a stall right here in front of City Hall is closer, much closer than having one in the
But
library,
the ramp is further
the ramp.
west, east.
There's that parking
Oh,
spot. next
that's
to
right.
the
I keep
dumpster.
forgetting about that. Okay. I think this was a sufficient conversation to
Yeah.
pass along.
Great, thank you. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, operating budget.
Yes, so this is our department's operating budget and capital budget. And I'll go over the changes that we're proposing first in the operating budget. They're pretty minimal. Daphne, if you want to go to page 82 of the packet. We are proposing one change. You can see in the column on the right, the yellow, we're taking out our 600 that we have in there for communications because we don't have any cell phones for any of our staff members. So we're removing that. And then if you go to page 83 on the revenue side, we are proposing to reduce the revenue that we expect to collect for zoning board of appeals. Right now it's 2,000. We're expecting a reduction because we have fewer variance applications with the new code. So we're recommending half of that. And then we are proposing a minimal increase in plan commission charges of $1,000. And you can see that in 2024, we're well over our revenue estimate. By mid-year, we had already reached the revenue estimate. But the reason that we're not proposing a more substantial increase in our estimate is because of those rezoning applications where we aren't going to see as many with the new code. And then for zoning permit fees, we're proposing an increase of 2,000 to bring our expected total to 20,000. Zoning permits are issued for pretty much any site improvement that requires a building permit also requires a zoning permit. So those are all pretty modest changes. And then if you go to page, I think it's the next page, 84. You can see the listing of our capital budget items. And this is the prioritization that we submitted to our finance department. We haven't had our meeting yet. Each department meets with the mayor, as well as the city administrator and the finance department staff to go over these. So there's still time to make changes if there are any items that you think we should reprioritize. But we've ranked the 2 sustainability items as 1 and 2 because the strategic plan placed a priority on environmental sustainability. And so we're trying to align with the council's direction coming out of that strategic plan. The Efficiency Navigator program is a continuation of a successful program that is already in place. We're recommending 150,000 out of capital. The big change there is that program was previously funded by ARPA. And then the second item is sustainable building guidelines for all development. This is an estimate that we put together. We would like to hire a consultant to put this together. But we do want to note that in talking with our sustainability coordinator, Kelly, we do think that this is something that's probably going to require updating every few years because there are so many things that are changing in terms of recommendations. But I know that when I meet with developers who are proposing a building, many of them want to do the right thing. They want to build to the highest level of sustainability. And so we're kind of listing the different things, but it would really be nice if we had some kind of it cannot be a requirement. We can't require something that's stricter than the building code unless the city's providing an incentive or if it's negotiated, but we could at least provide them with these guidelines and say, this is what we want to see. And we think that we would get a lot of people interested in that. We could also use it for municipal construction. The third item is the Cayuga connector. This is the multi-use path connection from downtown to the Parmenter roundabout. And the design is budgeted this year and nearly completed for this project. So this would be construction using TIF $3. The expenditure period for TIF District 3 ends in 2025. So it's the last year that we can get it done. We need to get it constructed in 2025 in order to take advantage of that as the funding source.
Is that on the west side of the properties? I was unclear where that.
It's just east of the Beltline. It kind of skirts
okay.
along the east side of the Beltline
Yeah.
on-ramp
Okay.
and highway.
And you said design work has been completed on that?
Are we at 90% mark for design for Cayuga?
I don't know that we have officially hit 90%, but we had a 60%, which gave us the estimate of opinion of probable cost.
I do want to
Good.
mention with both the Cayuga connector and the multi-use path, which is item number 4, that our Parks Department director wanted us to make sure that anytime we're proposing new path systems, that we're also accounting for the additional maintenance that's required, which results in additional staff time for plowing and also just ongoing maintenance costs for repaving, resurfacing the trail system. So I would not be surprised if Parks has a corresponding budget request for additional staff for operations. The fourth item is the multi-use path on the east side of Allen Boulevard. And this has actually already been budgeted from TIF District 5 in 2024 this year. However, we have not been able to come to terms with the property owner that we need to get land from, which is Harbor Athletic Club. We are still in discussions. We had a meeting as recently as 2 weeks ago with them, but without their cooperation on the land, we can't construct this path. We have talked with Strand Engineering, who's doing the design, about looking into whether or not we could cross at Maywood Avenue and then run the path on the west side of Allen Boulevard from Maywood north to Century Avenue. But this project, we view this as a very important project because we already have the path constructed south of the Midtown Shopping Center on Allen Boulevard. And we are making improvements, or we have a study underway right now for how we can improve pedestrian crossing at the Century and Allen intersection. And then we also have the North Mendota Trail that's mostly constructed. So this is like kind of a key missing gap now in the network. And when a project is funded by TIF funding, rather than requesting a capital carryover, we request it as a new budget item. So that's why you're seeing it as a new request, is because it's TIF funded. Lisa and Laura Lane streetscaping includes planting of trees as well as sidewalk installation. And this is another project that was also budgeted in 2024 and is being requested as a new budget item because it's TIF funded. This is ready to bid, but our consultants advised us by the time that we got it ready to go that we were not looking at a favorable timeline for bidding because the project kind of got delayed a little longer than we wanted. And so we asked them to hold off on bidding it so that we can bid it in the winter when they think that we'll be able to get more favorable cost estimates. And then we have the Century Avenue Road Diet Study. We're proposing capital budget for that, and that's still an active request. We had shown this as a budget request a couple of years ago. At that point in time, we were hoping to secure grant funding, but we were unable to get the funding that we were applying for. And so now we're just showing it fully as capital, but we're still looking into whether there might be a grant that could help fund part of that study.
Can you briefly explain to me what diet study is?
It's what we did to Gammon Road 10 years ago. So taking a 4-lane road down to 1 lane in each
So we're
direction.
not grinding up concrete and feeding that to people. Okay.
And this is just for the
Eat your
segment
vegetables.
of Century Avenue that is between Parmenter and Branch Street, correct?
Yeah, I hope we can get to Branch Street. It might be difficult, but
And just for our citizens for whom the term road diet causes some consternation, I'm thinking of certain editorial comments in certain Madison newspapers. It is listed as the best practice by the Federal Highway Administration for traffic
Calming?
reduction, traffic calming,
Yeah.
reduction of accidents and
Cool.
environmental benefits. So
Makes sense.
and the challenge we have specifically with Century Avenue west of Branch Street is that it's a narrower roadway and we don't have an option for extending the path west of Branch Street. I'd like to replace the sidewalk on the north side, but we just don't have the right of way to do it.
Right. And we have that median.
Not
No,
west
not
of
there.
Branch Street.
Not
Well,
there.
there's a
Yeah.
little bit around Middleton Hills, but
Yeah.
that's an outlier.
Yeah.
Odana Road's another good example on the west side if you want to see what a road diet does.
Then the last item that we have on our list of requests for 2025 is phase 2 of the bus stop improvements. So with the new Metro Transit redesign, we went to the council and requested funding to get accessible pads poured, as well as getting some amenities added at some of the stops, including shelters and also bike racks. And we've heard a lot of positive feedback for the improvements that we've made. So we're proposing some additional funding to make further improvements.
does that include some of the artwork that was recently installed?
The artwork was actually separately funded
Okay.
through capital and TIF. It was a project that was originally envisioned for utility boxes, but we couldn't get written permission from MG&E to put the artwork on the utility boxes. And so that project was reconsidered and we did the bus stops instead.
Wouldn't that be funded by the Arts Committee?
Yeah, I mean, it was a request from the Arts Committee, but it was
Okay.
funded by the city.
Okay.
Just a quick note about bus stops and, so I'm a bus commuter. And I know the new buses, I think that Route F is gonna, or the one that goes primarily through the city, every half hour is gonna get the new articulated buses pretty soon. And those buses are designed to enter both the front and the rear and exit front and rear as well. The bus pads are great for entering at the front of the bus. They are terrible in the winter for exiting at the rear. And I'm just thinking of some, if you have somebody with accessibility issues, hoping they're using the front entrance, but now you're also gonna have the ability to pay or, pay or use your bus pass at the rear entrance as well. So, I mean, our bus stops don't get very busy. I mean, normally the most I think I see in my route is 3 or 4 people, at a stop during peak commute time, but just taking into consideration when we have the new buses come in, that the entering and exiting the bus is going to be a little bit different. And in the winter, when we have snow piles, it can be a little challenging.
Wouldn't it be easier to get them to stop twice, front and back?
Are you joking?
No.
Oh, not easier, cheaper.
We cheaper.
I mean, I think most people will continue, especially in the winter, just to use the front.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those buses are really designed for the high volume BRT corridor where you've seen them now, the bus stops that are in the middle of the median on Mineral Point Road and in University in a couple of places. That's where the double bus configuration, where there's one continuous platform. Once these buses get out
Pedestrian killers.
beyond that corridor, there's not going to be double bus stops or boarding pads in most cases.
Yeah.
Did you have more, Abby?
That was it for the 2025 request. Happy to answer any questions or make any changes.
We're only talking about 25, not right now, not 26 or 27.
Yeah, we're just showing those for future year, but the council will only be deliberating and voting on the 2025 budget.
Right.
I have some questions.
Okay.
Starting on page 80. Just curious, when was the mission of the planning department last reviewed? Because I don't know what it means to thrive, make sure the city thrives in a measured and balanced manner.
That is a carryover from probably as long as I've been with the city. So my guess is it has not been reviewed in 20 years.
I would encourage an update to that. I looked up Madison's. It says the department works to guide future growth and development, which I think is what you all do. Verona has a good one too. And I didn't particularly think Fitchburg's worked for us. Second, the goals. That's a big, long list of goals. And so my question is this list realistic? Or is it prioritized in order of what you need to get done and want to get done and think you can get done? Because I'd rather have a shorter list of goals, all of which or most of which will be mostly accomplished, than have your to-do list continue to grow year after year.
They're not in a priority order, because I kind of tried to lump similar projects together. So like the sustainability related projects are kind of in one section.
Okay.
We could prioritize them. I do think that these are all on the docket though for us to do in 2025. It's possible that some of these things, like for example, the solar on the utility wells, I know that has already been pushed back a couple of years. So, probably the projects that require bidding and construction are the ones that are more likely to get delayed.
Okay. I'm just, I totally understand that the three of you and Kelly are completely swamped and I don't want to add to your work, but I'm about to ask for something. Would it be possible to get a simple template for a web page for every development project that comes in, like the big ones, not the addition of stairs, but the big ones, so that there's a link to the preliminary plat, or the final plat, the GDP, the SIP, have those documents in one place. You might have access through an internal,
Internet.
intranet, but we don't. And I know there are so many times when I'm like, okay, which meeting was it when we talked about this development and what came out of that? And I think, again, going back to the strategic plan that talks about using technology, like really making the most out of technology to get information to the people who need it. I think this would be really useful for the developers, for the plan commission, for the staff, and for residents to be able to access that. And I think once the template is developed and created, it shouldn't be very difficult to starting, with new developments or maybe the big ones we've been talking about this year. It shouldn't be that difficult to keep those pages up to date. So that's
So
just.
you mean something like at the top where you select Red Tail Ridge, and I'd like to see the plat. I'd like
Yep.
to see the zoning. I'd like to see, that sort of thing.
Yep, I think that would be enormously useful. I know Madison's got something that's their own creation and it's way more involved than what I'm suggesting. I'm just suggesting a simple list of all the big documents and where we can find the
Yes,
most
for that,
recent
essentially.
ones.
And,
Yeah.
and if that's not too much to add, just something on the website that would, so if someone goes current projects, they would see, oh, okay, they're in phase 3. This has been approved. This has been,
Like a status.
the status.
I have
I
a
don't know how
feeling
to say it.
Daphne's already half designed this while we're sitting here. So
Way to go,
the
Daphne.
wheels are, I can feel the wheels turning over here.
Moving on to page 81, I see that one of the significant issues is continuing to provide support for the 12 committees and commissions. How did your committees and commissions fare with, again, going back to the strategic plan, the consolidation attempt?
All of our committees and commissions reviewed the 3 questions that were submitted. None of them proposed consolidating with another committee. There were a couple that agreed to meet less frequently.
And did that help?
That helps a lot.
Okay,
Yeah, for sure.
good. On page 82, looking at the budget itself. So I noted you've got the placemaking coordinator as a full-time, as an FTE, but I don't see a decision item changing salaries at all.
Yeah, that is done separately by HR. So
Okay.
I submitted the position to HR with a recommended grade of 9, which is equivalent with the associate planner position. But he suggested a lower grade of 5, which he is, I believe, bringing forward eventually to the Finance and Personnel Committee. But we don't submit that as a decision item for a salary individually. That's done separately through HR.
Okay. All right, so I'll be seeing that. Okay, and then.
What is level 5? Is that more like a planning technician level?
I think that he was looking at it more as the event side of things, because the event coordinator position that is already funded, which is funded at halftime, is like a grade 1 or 2.
Okay.
And so what I was hoping is when we made it full-time, we would get more support for other planning functions, and so that we would provide a higher grade for that, so that we could get somebody that, has a degree in planning and can jump in and help us with grants and, even permitting and other things that would come up, as well as doing the event coordination side, where I think our human resources director thought it was just more appropriate to be like kind of split the difference between the previous grade and what I was proposing.
Okay, moving to the list of the capital projects, I had a question about the Allen and Century. Okay, that one's coming up next year, so I'm not gonna worry about that now. I'll hold my comment until next.
Don't forget it.
Next year. The the Cayuga connector. Are there any intersection improvements needed for the increased bike usage when you get to University?
That's a good question. I believe there's a push button walk signal there. We are not planning at this point to widen the crosswalk that's there. That's a fairly recent addition to the street network. So the answer to your question is, with this project, the answer is no. The most difficult part of the project is that approach to that intersection because of constraints, right-of-way constraints between the fire station and the on-ramp and a utility box. So there will be some modification at the on-ramp. But the intersection itself would not be modified.
Okay.
And I will add that for that project, both Abby and I were very surprised that the dollar estimate wasn't higher. And I think the reason for that is because there are no, it's all essentially all grass, you know, it's in some grading, but there's no improvements or, you know, there's no infrastructure that has to be altered like we did with the North Mendota Trail, which required quite a bit of effort. So, you know, minimal, again, right by the fire stations where the most complicated, where really the only complicated part of the project is. And the rest of it goes all the way north to the roundabout at Parmenter, and that's very straightforward.
Okay, that's it for my question.
I've actually wondered whether, if you can go north again a little bit, please, Stephanie. I've actually wondered whether this little triangle where the arrow is, go up a little bit more. There's like this whole area back here that's not utilized. And I've wondered whether there's even opportunity there to have like a little sort of a park amenity for the multifamily housing back there eventually, accessible via this path.
Is that private property?
No, but it's maybe something we can get access from DOT because that's nothing they need, in my view.
Right.
But that's not part of this project, obviously.
Question about the multi-use path you said of Allen. I know I've brought this up before. Abby, you said they're studying the crosswalk situation on Allen and Century. Does the studying including adding a crosswalk to cross Century on the east side? So that if you do get a cooperation from Harbor, complete that path up to Century, you can actually cross there to the North Mendota Trail?
We met with them a few weeks ago. It sounds like that is something they're studying. They're looking at the intersection. I hope they're looking at it as holistically as they need to be. And that seems to be the case, but obviously the turning movements there going from south to east and vice versa are very heavy. I also asked about the idea of getting rid of the two right, instead of having them be slip lanes that are high speed, but having them be right turns to make it more pedestrian friendly. So we're looking at various ways to improve that intersection.
Because if it's part of the bigger bike network, you know, if you're biking down the North Mendota Trail, and then you want to go down that side of
Right.
Allen, you're crossing 3 roads to be able to do that.
Yeah,
And I
we're-
just don't see that being safe
Mhm.
or
Right.
practical.
No, I completely agree. And as a biker myself, and I think many of us here are, we want, obviously bicyclists want to be just like motorists. You want to go in direct paths and safe paths.
Well, and I did ask the Public Works Committee to add that because I attended the meeting at which they discussed the preliminary or the proposals they had received. And because the RFP did not specify connect the north and south
I know.
on the east side, it wasn't in the drawings, you know, just to show that the proposals, they understood what was expected. And I pointed out, we're going to have potentially a 7-story building at Middleton Shores, and anybody going from there to Harbor Athletic Club or any of the, you know, restaurants or shops over there would need to cross 3 times, and that's not acceptable. So I specifically asked them to build in something into the proposal to connect the fourth side. So
Well,
let's hope they're
You know,
doing it.
also people live in the Lake 61 apartment, anybody on Middleton Beach Road, and, you know, future development at the
Yep.
Allen Boulevard, you know, soccer site. That's the quickest way to get to the Conservancy, is to cross right there, you know, because there's a Conservancy entrance right there, so you just. I don't
Yeah,
know,
there are a
like-
lot of reasons.
Yeah,
Yeah, but there's so much traffic making that turn. I can see where this could be difficult to
Yeah.
get that accomplished.
Madison's done a lot of great intersection improvements, especially in the isthmus with
Mhm.
bike lanes or bike paths. I mean,
They have,
this Cap City Trail in front of Williamson or, Williamson Bicycle Works. They've done some really innovative things that, yes, they aren't inexpensive, but they really do a great job of prioritizing pedestrian and bicycle
Yeah.
circulation. And,
but the green.
yeah.
We
Yep.
already submitted it, we proposed it, but I don't
I've been taking lots of photos.
think.
That's what you're hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion on the budget? Hearing none, then.
or just discussion of them?
That was just discussion. If with that, then I will close the Plan Commission meeting. See y'all next time. Hopefully.
And I think I emailed you this, but for the next regularly scheduled meeting, which is Tuesday, September 10th, we did not have any agenda items that were submitted for that meeting. So we typically require submittals 4 weeks in advance, but we kind of waited a little bit just to see, and nothing has come in to be reviewed. So I don't think we'll be having a meeting that night.
So we can watch the debate unencumbered.
Oh, yeah, the debate's that night.
How does that affect our grade with George? Is that bad?
Maybe send a note to George on that.
Kurt, it means you can miss a meeting without penalty.
As-
Thank you,
as
Aaron
the-
and Chris.
The
Thank
two
you.
Kurts
Bye-bye.
get the D.